Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today we are talking about some romances in sci-fi and fantasy books. So I wanted to say a huge thank you to Book Depository for collaborating with me on this video. Book Depository is of course the online retailer where you can get your books shipped to over 130 countries worldwide for free. So if there are any of these books that kind of catch your interest that you want to check out, you can go ahead and take a look at the links down below. So I am a reader who absolutely loves romance in books. It's something that I really enjoy, and I feel like there are some books that just take the romance to like another level. So these are 5 sci-fi and fantasy books that do feature romance as either a subplot or part of the main plot, and they're all ones that I think do the romance really well. So we're starting out this list strong with probably my favorite fantasy romance. This author is so good at writing romances, and all of her books have a romance as kind of part of the core of the story. So this is Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. This is an absolutely gorgeous book that is based on medieval India, and the world building is incredible. The characters are so wonderful and memorable. The magic is amazing, and of course the romance is fabulous. So in this book we follow a character named Mare, and she's kind of torn between two worlds because her father is a member of kind of the ruling class, and her mother was a member of this kind of people who are treated as second-class citizens. They're sort of wandering nomadic people. And her mother's people have magic. They perform these rites through dance and ritual, and they can perform magic. So one day Mare is caught performing these rites in secret, and she ends up being forced into an arranged marriage that will kind of bind her to the Empire and sort of force her magic to be used in a way that she does not want. So this sounds horrifying, but the romance in this book is so good. So it's definitely a slow burn, and I find that Tasha's books do tend to be a little bit more of a slow burn. They kind of build and build and build and build, and you cannot put them down. The love interest is fabulous. I love the kind of the dynamics between Mare and him, and I love the kind of questions of things like consent and this arranged marriage and everything. It is so good. And if you enjoy this, it's actually a duology. In the second book, we follow Mare's little sister, who we see very briefly in the beginning, many years later, and she gets her own story. So if you enjoy this one, there is a second on the way, and she also has a new book coming out later this year, which I'm very excited for, called The Jasmine Throne. So if you're looking for romance, Tasha's your gal. This next book is a YA fantasy novel, and it totally blew me away when I read it. One of the things that I really appreciated about this book, especially regarding the romance, is the sort of inversions of the tropes that I expected to be in a YA romance. So this is A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. So in this book we follow 2 characters. The first is Malik, and he and his sisters are traveling to the desert city of Ziran to sort of seek their fortune during the Solstasia Festival, which is this huge festival that's held every 50 years or so, I believe. And when they reach the city, his little sister is kidnapped by vengeful spirits, and he strikes a deal to get her back. If he murders the crown princess Karina, he will get his sister back. Now Malik is a very soft, you'd call him a cinnamon roll kind of guy, and he absolutely does not want to do this, but he desperately wants his little sister back. So the other perspective, of course, is Karina, and she is very much a sort of headstrong, stubborn girl, and her mother, the queen, is actually assassinated, and she becomes queen. She has not been prepared for this whatsoever. She had an older sister who was supposed to become the heir. She does not feel prepared. No one has any faith in her, and in her grief she decides to conduct a very dark ritual to bring her mother back from the dead. So these 2 stories sort of collide and intertwine, and I loved the dynamics between the 2 of them, and I really appreciated the fact that sort of Karina takes on the sort of stronger role, and Malik is much more of, he's a great person, he's a strong character, but he's a very soft character, which you don't see in YA very often, and you certainly don't see with the sort of love interest. I thought this was fabulous. It's got beautiful, beautiful world building and culture. Everything around the Solstasia festival is so incredibly cool. I read this in a day. I loved it. I could not put it down, and the romance had a lot to do with that. Moving over to sci-fi, this is a new book and I absolutely fell in love with it. It's such a lovely story and it's such a fabulous book. This is Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. So Winter's Orbit is a sci-fi story that basically takes all of the romance tropes that I love and puts them in a big pot and mixes them together and just spits out this book. So we have two characters who are sort of thrown together in an arranged marriage, and the fate of the Empire rests on this marriage working out. So we have Kiem, who is the sort of least favorite grandson of the Emperor, and he's sort of like early days Prince Harry, sort of running around Vegas naked and getting caught by the paparazzi kind of guy. Really good-natured, constantly getting himself into trouble. No one really takes him seriously. So he finds out with like 15 minutes notice that he is going to be married off to a young man named Janan. And Janan is from one of the vassal planets of the Empire, and the Empire has this sort of treaty with a much bigger power to keep the peace. However, the Empire has to prove that everybody gets along, they're treating their people well. So Kiem and Janan are basically being married off to sort of prove that there is this solid relationship between the Empire and this vassal planet, and that everything is totally fine. There are some problems though. Janan is a widower and his husband was killed in essentially like a sci-fi car crash, and it may or may not have been murder, and there's lots of small things going wrong in the background that leads to bigger questions of conspiracy. The first half of this book is definitely much more focused on the romance. The romance is a huge part of this book, probably more so than the rest of the books on this list. It is the main factor of this book. And there's plot and stuff, but really we're focusing on the relationship between these two characters, how they feel about each other, and how their relationship begins to change, and sort of how their past is interfering with their relationship. This is a wonderful book. I loved it. I thought it was such a fun read. I totally ate it up, and it features so many romance tropes that I absolutely love. We've got the arranged marriage or fake dating. We have there's only one bed. We have, you know, the sort of silly character with the very stoic kind of character. It was just absolutely fabulous. I thought this was so much fun, and if you're not a big sci-fi reader, I would still recommend this one because I think it's a really good entry into the genre. Next up, we have a fantasy series that is a little bit different in terms of the romance, although I can't really say why. So this is the Daevabad series by S.A. Chakraborty, starting with City of Brass. So this book takes place in 18th century Cairo, and we follow a young woman named Nari. Now Nari is an orphan. She's been living on the streets her whole life by her wits. So she is a con artist, but she also has a secret. She has this amazing ability to sense illness in people, and she very much keeps this secret, and she sort of makes her living conning the colonizers who are coming into the city and fighting over Egypt, but she also performs these kinds of basically fake rites and rituals. However, one day she accidentally performs one of these rites, and it turns out to be a very real thing. She summons a djinn, and she is whisked away to the city of Brass, Daevabad, where she learns all about her heritage, the djinn and their politics, and the royal family, and it is so incredibly good. So this book not only has fabulous romance, it has a lot of kind of conflict within the romance, but it also has the single best love triangle that has ever been written, and I do not like love triangles at all, but it is so incredibly well done, and I absolutely loved it. I loved all of these characters. I, for once, actually really liked both people on either end of the love triangle. I love Nari. She's an amazing person, and she's so fabulous, and it's a little bit dense at times, I think, because you're getting into a lot of the politics of these people, but it is so good, and the series will absolutely break your heart. It is fabulous, and it is so well done. This is one of my favorite books ever. And my very last recommendation for excellent sci-fi and fantasy romances is a book that I didn't think I would actually like all that much. I picked it up because of the incredible hype surrounding it when it first came out, and I'm really glad I did. This is definitely the kind of book where I need to be in the right mood because it's quite flowery writing and it's a little bit sappy at times with its romance, but it is wonderful. This is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. So this is a really fabulous duology. I absolutely loved it, and as I said, I don't think it's the kind of thing I'd normally pick up, but I thought that it was just absolutely stunning. So in this book, we follow a character named Laszlo Strange, and he is an orphan. He is growing up in this kind of great library. He doesn't really fit in. He is, in fact, a bit of a dreamer, and his kind of like great goal in life is to discover more about the city called Weep, which has really no sort of documentation. It's almost like it doesn't exist. And one day he ends up being able to join an expedition to Weep, and he learns about the horrific things that happened there. So on the other side of things, we have a character named Sarai, and she is dubbed the Muse of Nightmares, which is like the best title ever, and she is the daughter of a goddess. So the gods came to the city of Weep in this giant floating citadel shaped like an angel, and it towered over this city for years and years, and they completely traumatized the citizens. So people were kidnapped and they were returned having had children or having, fathered children, having their memory completely wiped. This town is totally traumatized. And one day a young man called the Godslayer goes up and he slays all of the gods except for these 5 children who managed to hide and survive. So they are living in the citadel, completely cut off from the world, and she's kind of taking out her revenge on the people who live in this city by invading their dreams and causing them to have these horrible nightmares, hence her amazing title of Muse of Nightmares. So the two of them end up obviously sort of having their stories intertwine, and the romance that results is wonderful. It is super sappy, but it's lovely, and it works really well with the writing of the book and sort of her way with words, and I absolutely love this. I thought this was fantastic. It's one of my favorite YA books, and I would love to read this again and again and again because I just think it's so lovely. So those are my 5 recommendations for sci-fi and fantasy books that do feature romance either as a subplot or part of the main core story. I would absolutely love to hear in the comments below if you have read any of these books or if you have suggestions for books that have fabulous romances. I post bookish content on my YouTube channel. I should read that every week, so go ahead and stop by, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time.